Every day I find a light to make me shine. 조금 기다리더라도 괜찮은 건 사랑에 빠진 것 같은 느낌처럼 You take me up to the stars. Hope feeling raindrops in my head. 살며시 내려오면 가까이 다가와줘. 하루하루 그대와 지금처럼 Don't forget my heart. Every day I wish to fly just like a bird. 어디든 너와 함께 가고 싶은 걸. 사랑에 빠진 것 같은 느낌처럼 You take me up to the stars. Oh, 곁은 teardrops in my hand. 그대가 힘들 때면 내가 안아줄게요. 하루하루 그대와 지금처럼 Don't forget my heart. When falling down again, I'm here, making sure that you're okay. When feeling down again, I'm here, I will be your sunlight. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. 하루하루 그대와 지금처럼 Don't forget my heart. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Raindrops are falling. Raindrops are falling on my cheeks. Dum 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 dum. 언제였던 건지 기억나지 않아. 자꾸 내 머리가 너로 어지럽던 시작.
한두 번씩 떠오르던 생각 자꾸 늘어가서
조금 당황스러운 이 마음.
별일이 아닐 수 있다고.
사소한 마음이라
Hey guys, so are you ready? We're going to start your lecture very soon. So before we start, now we'll take 5 minutes to talk about your quiz, how you have did for your quiz lah. Okay, I think we need to talk. And yeah, so again, I'm very happy that I can still see you today after the quiz. Every one of you still come back, so it's a good sign. So for your quiz, I think by now you can guess that some people did well, some people don't do very well. The average is around 5 to 6 out of 10. So yeah, that is why we need to talk. Okay, so I don't know about you. Do you think that you're happy with your quiz, the score of your quiz right now, or you think that you can do better? Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you this question using a poll here, and maybe we want to consider having an extra quiz so that you can improve your marks that you have currently. So we can call this extra quiz or quiz 2 or something, just to add some marks to your current marks so that you feel better. Because I can tell you, some of you might not be happy after seeing your score, and yeah, if you're not happy, then I'm also not happy. Okay, if you're happy, then I'm happy. So that's why I'm going to ask you this question right now, and we'll do it on Slido. We'll do a vote. If we have a lot of students who want to do an extra quiz, we'll do that. And the reason I'm asking is because some people has already did very well, okay? And if we just do an extra quiz, this might not be fair to those students who have did well. So which is why we have to vote. And then for the second quiz, it will be a lot more easier, okay? So if you think that quiz 1 might be too hard for you, this is because this is the first time you are doing so that's why it might be hard. You are not familiar with the start of the questions yet. So sooner or later you'll get better lah. But right now, if you're going to do an extra quiz, it will be really, really easy just to help you. To push your marks a little bit. So we'll see. And how can we vote now? Okay, now you can do this on your phone or on your PC or anything. So you can just open up a web browser, go to this website Slido. For those who have been asking questions regularly, you know Slido.com. And I will start the vote now, the poll, and then you can just choose whether you want to do an extra quiz or not. Okay. So I will leave this open for 2 minutes. You vote on this, and then we'll decide based on the majority lah. Okay. Now for those who are saying no, maybe you think that this is extra work for you. So I just want to make this clear that the second quiz wouldn't be that tricky as the first one. The reason we have the second quiz is just to help you to get a better score, overall score average for your quiz. Okay, so that's the only intention. So we have about 100 votes now. Because we have about 150 to 200 students for this stream, so we'll wait for a few more and then we'll decide. I think it's very clear lah. By now it's very clear that most of you want to have. So now this is how it works. So we have, since everybody agree on this, we'll just have one extra quiz. Again, similar style, similar format, same scope, but the difficulty is way easier. And then what we'll do is we'll combine the marks of both of your quiz, and then we'll take the average score so that you can somehow push the marks up a little bit. Now for those who don't want to do the quiz, you have 2 options. Now either you do so, and then again I'm very sure you'll push your current score up again, or if you have already done well lah, If you don't want, then I'll just keep your first quiz, the score for your first quiz, as the full marks for your quiz. Okay, so that is how we're going to decide, because most of the students have decided to have one more quiz. Okay, so this is for your good. I hope that you don't see I'm giving you extra stuff, you already have enough headache. No, this is just for you. Okay, so if you're okay, then we'll go on. We'll continue with our router configurations. Just very quickly, we will finish this up, and then we'll start to talk about network routing today. Okay, now to clear up some of the doubts that you guys are having here, because I know some of the students you did very well, congrats lah. So yeah, if you do not want to do the second quiz, which means that if we don't see the marks for your second quiz, you don't have the attempts, then you will just keep your first quiz as your full mark. Okay, now if we have 2 marks, quiz 1 and second extra quiz, then we'll take the average score for your quiz as the total mark. Yes, for the format is all the same, still the same scope from lecture 1 to lecture 3 and including your lab 1. 20 questions MCQ, but way easier. Okay. Yeah, what Kenny says is right. It's quite surprising. Everybody said no, and then the poll is showing us yes. So I don't know if that is the poll, that's a decision, then we will have to follow that lah. Okay, now for the quiz, we will not be doing the quiz on the lecture hours anymore because we have to go on with the lectures. So I will put this quiz on Weber throughout the whole weekend. You have the whole weekend to finish the quiz. So meaning that I'll give you the exact date on Weber because I haven't decided yet. So most likely it will be starting from Saturday morning until Sunday night, and you can do this anytime you think it is convenient for you. Okay. So you guys okay with this arrangement? Happy? If you're happy, then we'll start your lecture, the part 2 for router configurations. Happy, right? If you're happy, then I have the mode to carry on. Okay guys, now for this lecture, we'll continue with the routing configuration. So I need you to open up 2 things. Again, just a packet tracer file. That day we stop here, we have already started adding all the physical interface to the router. And today what we'll do is very simple. I will show you some tips and tricks on how to configure router very quickly so that in your lab test 1, which is again coming soon, you know exactly what you need to do immediately when you see the questions. Okay. Now for those who have done the lab, this might come very easy to you, but you see the problem with the lab is that you have too many commands and everything is like you have everything every place lah. So during the lab test, test and practical is different. In the test you are in panic mode. In the practical you don't have this time pressure. So which is why this cheat sheet that you have, it is on Weber. This is going to be very helpful for you during your lab test 1. Okay, so that you know exactly what command to type instead of having to go through the whole lab manual to find the command lah. Okay, yeah. So since we are already here, I will just briefly talk about your lab test 1 as well. Lab test 1, we'll do this on week 6. And the scope of the lab test 1 is actually what you have learned in packet tracer so far, not including lab 1 because lab 1 is Eagle server. So your lab 2 and your lab 3. Just 2 lab 2 and lab 3. And what you need to do is actually configuring routers and also building your network. So if you remember previously in lab 2, you have already learned how to build a local area network on packet tracer. So that is 50% of lab test 1. another 50% will be what I'm showing you today, how to configure a router. Okay. So now the other day we stopped here. If you look at the cheat sheet here, there's the one in yellow color, check info. Now on a router, we will do many configurations. Okay. So after we have done the config, sometimes we want to check the configuration back for a few reasons. So one reason is that you have configured but you forget what you have configured. The second reason is that you configured already but the router is not working as intended. So you want to see what you configured wrongly. So all the check info that you see here, over here, the one in yellow color, the table is allowing us to check for certain information. Now, of course, you don't want to type all this show, okay? On packet tracer, the show, or maybe we should say on a Cisco router, show command is very useful to show important info, but you don't want to type everything because it is just showing you information. It is not changing any configurations on the router. Okay, so you don't want to waste your time to type show unless it is necessary. Okay, now there are a few shows command that is always very important that you will be using them quite often. So I will now I will highlight them for you. But before that, I'll just quickly go through some of these commands. So now let's say if I go to my router here. Okay, and then remember there are two ways you can configure a router. Either you do this from this PC here. If you are doing this on this PC, then you have to go to the PC and then go to desktop, go to terminal, you click OK. That is where you can start your config. Now for those who want shortcut, you can still do this from the router directly using the CLI tab. This is where you put in all the commands. And remember, last week we talked about the 4 levels of CLI, which is important because for different commands that you are going to type, you should type in different level, okay? Depend at the correct level. So now, let's say if you want to show something, you have to be in at least privilege mode. So you have to see the hashtag sign. If you can see the hashtag here, means that you can start typing your command. Okay, so now I will just show you a few examples of show. Okay, now you see I can do a show version, then it will tell me what is the operating system that this router is currently running. So for example, if your PC, you might be running on Windows 8 or on Windows 10. You have different versions of Windows. So for Cisco iOS, the OS that's running on Cisco equipment, they have many versions as well. So the way you find out what is the current version is by using a show version, and here, this place here is where you see all the version information. Okay, now also we have learned that on a router, because router is just like a PC, you have your processor, you have RAM, you have ROM, you have all the storage like what you have on a normal PC, and this OS here has to be stored in one of the place inside the router, and in fact it is stored in the it is stored in the flash. So you see another thing is that when I do a show flash, okay, I can see all the contents that I currently save in my router, which means that what data or what file that I save locally on the router, if I do a show flash, it will show me the file. And in fact, one of the things that you can notice here is that this is exactly what we have seen earlier when we do a show version, because this is actually the operating system. Okay, so which means that every time you start a router, the router will come here and then he load this file to start the operating system, and that's why you can see the router start up and then you can use the router. Okay, in fact, if you have noticed already, the file size is very big. It is like taking up half of the storage here. Okay, so anyway, the point is that this is the operating system that you use to run, that the router use to run all the logics for network packet forwarding, for routing, things like that. Okay, so of course you can show many other things. Now the next thing I want to show you is some tips and tricks on how you can configure router very quickly, and we'll start with the question mark command. So this is important in a way that it will help you a lot during your lab test one, because you only have 1 hour for your lab test. So now you see on the router, it is not possible for me to know that all the commands that I can type on the router. Okay, so we have this question mark that will tell us what to do. Now, if you are at one of the level here, so let's say this is a new router, and I want to do something at the user mode. You see a right arrow here means a user mode, which is the first level once you get into the router. Now, I do not know what I can do here. If I type a question mark, then the router will tell me that these are all the things that you can do. Okay, so which means that over here, I can type the command connect, I can type the command ping, something like that. But all these commands here, if you go to level 2, you cannot do so, because different command you need to do at different level. Okay, now let's say if I go to en, okay, I want to show some information, so I type the command. You see, if I press the question mark here, the router will tell me these are all the things that you can do, and in fact there are more. So if you want to go to the next page quickly, instead of going one by one, you can press the space bar on your keyboard. It will bring you to the next page. Okay, and here, let's say I see something like this. I can show some information, and now I want to show some information, right? Or maybe I can see, okay, there is a clock here. So depending on what you want to do, you can choose from here. Now let's say I want to do a show. So I type a show, and then I do not know what are the kind of things that I can show on a router. So again, I will do a question mark here, and the router will show me that these are all the things that you can type after the show keyword. So this, we call this parameters, and yeah, these are all the things that you can put in. So for example, this is what we have learned earlier. I can do a show flash, and we know that if I do this, you can see all the files that are currently stored on the router, right? Now, earlier what we have done, we have also done a show version. So if you see here, this is what we have done, which is why we can see the hardware and software status. So now over here, I'm not trying to teach you any command. I want you to learn this question mark, which is two of the most important things that you can learn. Okay. Now on Packet Tracer, if I haven't said this already, we pray to two gods. One god is the god of thunder, which is Zeus, and another one is the question mark. Now question mark is so important that every time when you do not know what to type next, you will ask question mark to give you the next syntax. The god of thunder is what you have learned earlier. During when you're building a network, you know that you have to connect cables. Now, some of the time, we don't know what kind of cable that I should use. Should I use a straight cable or cross cable? Now, that is not a worry anymore, because in today's modern computer network, we have this cable that will work for both straight and cross. So they are actually 2-in-1 right now. So which means that we don't really have to worry about what kind of cable that I should use. And on Packet Tracer, you can use this thunder sign, and this will automatically figure out what kind of cables that you should use to connect between two devices. So for example, like two PC, so should I be using a straight or a cross? If you use this, automatically it will tell you, and that is the god of thunder. Zeus will tell us how to do that. Okay, so that is the second god. So coming back to the example here, now let's continue with this question mark. So let's say I do a show, and then I want to see something about the router IP, because we know that on a router you have many interfaces. You have FA00, FA01, sometimes you have E000. Now if you want to know whether this interface is up or down currently, or what is the IP address of this interface, so you can use this command show IP interface brief, which is the second most important command for you to do troubleshooting. Okay, now you see here, one of the syntax I can type is IP, which will tell me about IP information. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do now. I will type IP. Now, after that, what is next? I'll press question mark again, and then router tell me, now these are all the things that you can type after the IP, the keyword. Okay, so for my case, because I want to know what is the interface status. Interface means the port on the router. So this is the right command here. So I will type interface, and then I do another question mark. Now the next keyword I should put in is all here. Now I just want to see a summary, so I'm going to use this command here, which is brief. So I will finish the command out with brief, and I press enter. Now over here, it will show me all the information about the interface that I currently have on this router. And yeah, this is how I complete a command. So I don't really have to remember any command even for your test, because I can always build command as I need it. Okay, now, and what this command is showing us is that right now, it tell me that this router I have 3 interface, FA00, FA01, and Ethernet E000. Okay, which is what you should have also if you continue from the work that we had earlier. If you start a new, then now you only have 2 interfaces. Okay, I hope that you can do this along so that you know if you have any errors, then you can find out immediately. Okay, so over here you see which is true because 1, 2, 3, if you go back to the router physically, if you look at the back of this router, remember when we first bought this router, we have 2 interfaces here that come with the router, and then we buy a new card E000 here. So that is the new one, which is why we have 1, 2, 3 interface. Now, my questions to you is, using this router right now, this current router, how many network can we build? Can you answer me on the chat so that I know that you're still awake? How many network do you think we can build with these current configurations? Come, someone tell me. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just type a random number there. Anyone? Anyone? 3. Yes, 3 is correct. Now you have to remember that it's very easy for you to find out. Look at the number of ports you have on the router. If your router have 2 interface, you can build 2 networks. If you have 3 interface, you can build 3 networks. Now in this case, why it is not 4? In fact, you have 4 here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Because VLAN 1, the last one that you see here, is not a real interface. It is a default VLAN. So this is like we have learned about LAN. Local area network is LAN. VLAN is virtual local area network. We will learn more about what VLAN in some of the other lectures, but right now, you just assume that you cannot build any network with the VLAN yet. In fact, after you learn about VLAN, then you think actually you can. So if you say 3, that's correct. If you say 4, that's also correct. But right now, you should say 3, based on what you have learned so far. Okay. Now, next thing is if you look at the output here, you will see that at the very last column, the last 2 columns, you have 2 down, down, and down. So this is not a good sign because in computer network, something is down, then your boss will call you, and then you have to work extra time. So what does the down here means? The first column here, this one here that I'm referring to, now the one inside one is showing you, okay, now maybe it is easy if I say it this way. Why there are 2 down? That's because for every interface, you have to make sure that the physical connection is ready. Physical means that when you connect the cable, the 2 devices are actually detecting each other. So if that happens, then you will get the first down change to up. Okay. Now the second down refers to a logical status, meaning that two devices, although physically they can see each other, logically they also have to feel each other, and that happens when you have IP address. Okay, so I'll repeat this. The first down is for physical, just like you and your girlfriend. Sometimes you are together, that is physical connections. But when you are eating together, you play your phone, your girlfriend play her phone. So logically, mentally, you guys are not together. So that is for the logical connections, okay, which is why you have 2 status here. Now the only way you can get the first down to up, to change it to up, is you use the right cable, then you will get it. The second one, how do you change from down to up, is you have to assign an IP address, and then you have to turn on the interface on the router, then it will be up. Now, what we are looking for here is everything has to be up. When you do a show IP interface brief, if something is down, that means something is wrong with your configurations. Okay? So that is show IP interface brief, which is really important. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how can we use CLI shortcuts. Okay, shortcuts means that because we are pro, we don't want to be typing the same full length command every time we are trying to configure routers. So for example, let's say every time I'm configuring a router and then I want to see whether the IP address that I put in is correct or wrong, then I have to type this full command, which is going to take a lot of time. So every time I type this, it takes me 6 seconds. So if I type this for 10 times, it is going to take me 1 minute, right? Which is a lot of time. So you want to use shortcuts. And now I'll show you how you build shortcuts. But before that, there's another trick. Every time you have typed a command, you don't have to retype it. If you want to reuse the command, you can just use the arrow key up and down to navigate between what we have typed. So from what you have typed earlier, you can just press enter and then you'll get the same output. So that is a shortcut arrow key. But how about shortcuts? Now shortcuts, I'll show you an example. I type show sh ip int pr. This is the shortcut for this full-length command, show IP interface brief. If I type this, I press enter, you will see that I get exactly the same output again. But the question is, how do I know about this shortcut? Okay, it can be experienced because I have been configuring routers for so many years. It can also be built on the spot when you need it. So the tricks to CLI shortcut is that you need to find the unique characters that represent the command. So what I mean is, if I want to build a shortcut for show, I have to type sh, which is the short form for show, but not s. And I don't have to type sho, which is too long. So sh is just nice. So how do you know this is if I press s and I want to use s to represent the show command, the router will be confused because now I do a question mark. From the question mark, we know these are all the commands that you can type on a router. And you see, if I just type an S here, the router will be quite confused. So when you say S, do you mean you want to send, or you want to set up, or do you want to show, or you want to do SSH? What do you mean, right? Now, in fact, if I type SH, 2 characters, then immediately the router knows, I'm very sure you're referring to show because there are no other commands here that has H as the second character. So that is unique enough, and that is how I get SH as the shortcut for show. And then the next thing that I want to put in is IP. So IP is already short enough. You cannot make it any shorter. So we'll just type IP here. The next one is interface. So interface, you can see now interface is I. So if I type I, it is a bit confusing because it could mean inspect or interface or this, right? So we need to go this far, 3 characters int, so that the router know you're actually referring to the interface command when you put in the shortcuts, because that is unique enough. No other command is having T as a third character, so int is fine. And the last one is brief. So brief, you can just type a BR, or in fact B itself will work. So that is how I built the command, by finding just enough unique characters to represent that command, and then you can just type a short command to get the same kind of output. Okay, now this is just one example. Of course, you can build your own shortcuts as you try out more commands. And yeah, some of the commands that you use frequently, it's a good idea for you to remember their shortcuts. As you type, you start to remember them naturally, and that will save you a lot of time. Okay, so that is CLI shortcuts. Okay, now you are clear about this, then that means these are some kind of basic tips and tricks on a router. There's one more tricks that I want to show you right now, and then we'll get into configuring password and some other normal stuff. So now if you go back to your cheat sheet here, which is this sheet is the one that you should keep with you, stick it up on your toilet door, put it under your pillow, bring it with you all the time, because it's going to be very helpful. Now go back all the way up to the first table, startup routine. There is one command called no IP domain lookup. So I want you to refer to this command here, which is something that you have typed during your lab, but you might not know what you are doing. So I'll just briefly explain here. And before that, just now I promised that I will highlight some important show command for you. So I do them now. That is, show IP interface brief. That you always need that if you want to know whether you have configured IP correctly on a router. Now the next one is show run. Show run is very important because whatever changes that we make on the router, later you will see anything that you key in, it will be saved in the file we call these running configurations. And these running configurations, you can see what is inside. So if you do a show run command, you will see all the things that you have changed. Right now you don't see many things because we haven't really do much yet, but if you later on as you configure IP, you come back here, you will see that the IP address that you have changed will be shown here. Later on when you do a telnet or you change any of the password, show run will tell you what you have done here. Now why is this important? Anytime you configure a network, anything goes wrong, this is the first command that you will type, because this is where you will compare what you configure with what you have to configure. Okay, because you will always get a list of instructions and you have to see what are the differences. If you can find some difference between the instructions compared to your configurations file that you can get from typing the show run, then you know immediately that is the error there, and you will go back and change up that error by again retyping the right command for the second time. So show run is really important. Now after that, we go back to no IP domain lookup. And why do we type this? Some of the time we don't type, most of the time we don't type. Now you should always type this if you think you don't trust your finger, like you always type something wrong, or you always put in the wrong command at the wrong place, then you should be using this, because this command will actually disable the domain name lookup. So the story is like this. What they didn't tell about router is actually a girl, a female, and what we know about female is female always overthink. Okay, they always overthink. Like today, if you are late from work, then they will think, this guy, I think he has another girlfriend already. He don't love me anymore. So girls, they always overthink, and router do the same. Router always overthink. So let me show you one example here. Now if I get back to my router here and I type something that the router don't understand, then the router will start to overthink. For example, I say I love avocado, something like this. Then router says, hey, what is this? This is the first time I heard this. I do not know what to do with this. And you get a translating error. It's not an error, it's actually he's trying to figure out I love avocado as a domain name. So he could be thinking this is a server or this is a website. And right now the router is trying to help you to get to this website or server, which actually doesn't exist. It's just something that I have typed wrongly. And what will happen next is, as he'll be overthinking for quite some time. And what does it mean for you is you'll be sitting in front of the router, and then you have to wait until the router is done overthinking. Then you can continue with your configurations, which will take up a lot of time. Okay. And you don't want this to happen, because let's say if you think about this, if you had this problem in the lab test, you have to sit here, wait, and then go to get a cup of coffee, come back and continue with your test. So you have to wait until, see, it takes like 30 seconds for the router to stop overthinking and forgive you. So you don't want this to happen. And that brings us to this command here, the no IP domain lookup, because if you type this thing, you have to remember configuration, so it's always third level. Get into config mode, you type no IP domain lookup. I think it's with a dash here. Oops. Then you won't get any prompt telling you whether it's done or not, but it's already done. So you can try this out by doing the same thing. Now I do the same command, which is not recognized yet, and this time immediately the router will tell you, I don't know what you mean. Okay. So this is how you stop the router from overthinking. And if you type this command, it is going to save you a lot of time. If you think that you always type some command wrongly, you don't want the router to just sit there and then overthink. Okay, so that is no IP domain lookup. So yeah, since you guys are giving some great examples, so let's say if I type something wrong like this, I type C. You see, immediately I can just retype exit. So it is going to be really quick if you do this. Okay. Now that is some tips or trick that you should know about router. Next, we'll get into some basic configuration, which is also part of your lab test one. So if you have done the lab 2, it's a good time for you to recall what you have done. If you haven't, then it's a good time for you to pick this up first. And yeah, make sure you really know what is going on, because again, you have gone through quiz 1, you know that you really need to go deep, you really need to understand what is going on for you to do well in any of your assessment in this subject. Okay. Now the next command we will get into configure password. So the one that is in blue color. Now, let me ask you a question. If today you buy a new PC, what is the first thing that you'll do? What is the first logical thing? Okay, don't tell me that you press the power button, okay? Of course, you have to press the power button to turn on the PC, and yeah, once you get in, the very first thing you do will be to configure a password. Because if you don't configure a password, just like anything, your Facebook account or your Instagram account, if you left anything unprotected, like your Facebook, and then you go to the toilet, in a short while when you come back, you'll get to see you have a new status update. I love Guy. Something like this. Your friend, because your friend will always know you so well, they'll post all this nonsense on your wall. So yeah, that's why we need password, and it's the same thing for the router. And the only difference is that when it comes to router, you know that router there are a few levels. Comparing to Windows, you only have one level of protections, which means that on the router you need more than one password. Okay. Now, if you remember earlier, we talked about the 4 levels in the CLI. You have user mode, you have privilege mode, you have configuration modes, and then you get the interface mode. Now, for you to get from user mode to privilege mode level 1 to level 2, you need one password. For you to get into the router itself, before you can see the user mode, you already need one password, depending on what kind of connections that you are using to get into the router. So, which is why later on, we are going to configure 2 passwords. But remember that actually on a real router, there are more than 2 passwords. There are so many kind of different passwords that you can configure. Now, for example, you can configure a console password, you can configure a telnet password, you can configure a secret password, you can configure an SSH password. So there are just some examples of kind of password that you can configure. Now, for now, we're going to just configure 2 passwords. One, the console, the other one, the secret. Now, why console? Okay, you see on the cheat sheet here, to configure a console password, in fact, you only need 4 lines, which is really simple. I'll explain line by line so that you know why do we use these kind of parameters here. But before that, why console? The reason I configure a console password right now is because I'm connecting to my router using a console cable, which means that anyone that use this PC here want to connect into this router to do some configurations, I need to set a password to protect this console cable, these console connections, which is why we are going to set console password as our first password. This is the first way people can get into your router. Okay, so that explains config T and then line console 0. Now the console that you see here, this console here, represents the console connections. Okay, so let's try this out. So you get to your router, remember again, get from level 1 to level 2 configuration, so you have to get to level 3, and then you can start type line console, because we are setting up for the console 0. Now why 0? 0 is because now we only have one console connections, and because we are programmer always say array start from 0. Okay, please don't hit me, but yeah, array start from 0, so the first console is 0. If you have 2 console, then you have console 1, console 2, console 3, and now we'll start with 0 because we only have one console cable here. And in fact, normally you only have console 0 because you don't have more than one console ports on the router normally, unless you customize it. So now console 0, and then you want to get to set the password. Now the keyword for password is very intuitive. It is just password, then you put in followed by your password. Now this can be any plain text, any character. So just to help everyone remember, I just put Cisco so that later on we can all remember the same password. So I set Cisco as a console password. The next one is login. Now this is a keyword to turn on the protection, meaning that without the keyword login, you can set the password. When you check on show run, you can also see the password is already entered, but it means that you don't want to use this protection. Now when you type login, it means that you want to use this protection on the router, which means that it translates to 4 lines. Again, if you look at the cheat sheet here, just 4 lines you can set a password for console. And how do you test whether this password is working? The only way you can test is you have to try to log in again. So I will get out from this router, get all the way out. back to user mode, and then when I try to get in, I'll get a prompt like this, which means that every time this PC try to get into this router, he will be asked for the password. The console password is Cisco, and I type Cisco, I'll get into the user mode again. So that is console password. Okay, now the second password here, we're going to set a secret password. And why do we need a secret is because for me to go from user mode to the privilege mode, I want to set another level 2 password. Now before I set, when I type an EN, immediately I'll get into level 2, which is quite dangerous because you see, let's say if I have an intern, if the intern can only go to let's say user mode, then this is all the things that he can do, which means that it is kind of like read only. He can only check some information like what is the IP on the router. He can use this router and try to ping other router, which is like everything is read only. You don't really make any changes on the router. Now, when you go to level 2, you can actually do more. Let's say this, you go to level 2, these are all the things. Like you can actually turn off something, or you can create a folder, or you can create users, things like that. So level 2, you start to make changes to the router, which is why you need another password to protect from level 1 to level 2. And there are 2 ways you can do this. You can either protect using a normal password, just like the one you have for console, or you can protect this using a secret password, which means that it is like higher security, same password but encrypted. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. So I'll get into config T, and then the keyword here, according to your cheat sheet here, this is where we are right now. So just one line, in fact just one line, enable secret and then followed by your password. So get back here, and then the keyword is enable. Now over here you actually have 2 options. If you do a question mark, you see that you can either do a password or secret. If you think that okay, I don't mind, I can just put my password here, it is safe enough, then you can just use the first option, password. If you think you have trust issues, like after your quiz now we have trust issues, then you want to use a higher level of protection, which is secret. And secret means that the same password, let's say I put Cisco, they will encrypt this Cisco into a ciphertext which you cannot recognize. Okay, so in this example I'm going to show you the encrypted one. So I will type enable secret and then followed by Cisco again. So this is my second level password. I put and then I press enter. Now in this case you don't have to do login. By default, when you do a level 2 password, it is enabled by default. So that's it. Let's try and see whether this is working. So I get all the way up. Now get into the router. First one, I have to put in the console password Cisco, and from level 1 to level 2 now I have another password here, which is again Cisco, which is the second password that we have just set earlier. So right now you see that you have 2 passwords getting in console. You have to put in one. From level 1 to level 2 you have to put in another one. So in fact, since we are here, I'll do a show run and then I'll show you what we have just configured. Now earlier, the first thing that we have configured is the console password, and now if you do a show run, you can actually see that this is showing in the running configuration. It is currently active, it is in effect, and this is what we have configured earlier, which is exactly the same thing that we have typed. Now the one thing that you notice is you can actually see the password, which means that anybody that managed to get into the router, they can actually see what is the password. Okay, now of course, since you're already here, of course you already know the password, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But this is kind of dangerous, and if you think that you don't want this to be shown clearly to people, then you can use what we do earlier, the secret options. And you see, if I do this, and remember our password is actually Cisco, just 5 characters, but what the router will do is they will do some encryptions on it, and it will change that plain text into a ciphertext, which is something that you'll see here, a garbage. We call this a garbage or a cipher, and that means even I get inside, I cannot know what is the level 2 password. Okay, if I just put a password here, then I will see Cisco here. Then from here, actually I can go to level 2 because I already see your secret, your second level password is Cisco here. So this is why most of the time you want to do secret to translate the plain text into a ciphertext. And if you type this thing, the whole thing, I think most of the time you'll be typing wrongly because there are too many special characters here, And secondly, if you have typed everything correctly, you still wouldn't be able to get to level 2. Okay, so that is the 2 passwords that you will first set when you get a new router. Now, the third kind of password, okay, we'll do this also, is for a telnet. Now, by now, you should be very familiar when you talk about telnet, you know immediately this is for remote login, which means that I can configure a router from a place that is far away instead of having to be physically next to the router. Okay, and this is very useful. Let's say, for example, now I'm in Kampa, and if I want to configure the router in Sungai Long, I don't want to drive all the way to KL. But if I do, I'll be going there and then I go to IKEA because they're having sales now. But anyway, I don't want to do that, so I will just set the telnet connections on the router in Sungai Long, and then with the correct password, then I will just do a remote login from Kampa into Sungai Long to configure the router. Okay, so how do you do this? Let's get back to the prompt here. Go to config T again. Remember level 3. And now this one, you use the command line again, just like what you have for the console, except that now instead of using a console, you want to do a VTY. The command is given here, VTY. And when you type VTY, you are actually opening a telnet connections, followed by 2 numbers with space. And the example is showing you 04. I hope that connection is fine. I see some buffering here, so if the connection is bad, please let me know. So getting back to the lectures here, you want to put 2 numbers. 04 is the default. Now, you can put any numbers. Actually, I can put 1, 3. I can put 0, 15. That's fine. And what it means is that the first number is telling you the starting number. The last number is the last number. And in total, it will give us the total number of users that can use the telnet connection at the same time. So for example, you have put a 04 here. It means that at the same time, there are 5 users that can remotely connect into the router, because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 5 users that can use the router remote connections. Now if you need more, then let's say you want 10 people to get in, then you put 09, and then you get 10 simultaneous connections into the router. That is the number that you are putting in here. So of course, most of the time you wouldn't want, I don't see why you need 10 people to remote log into a router. Normally you have 1 or 2 engineers that are doing configuration. So 04 is actually more than enough. So I'll just stick with 04 here, which means you have 5 users at the same time. So again, if you have the question, then what happens if I have the 6th user? In this case, then the 6th user will have to wait until one of the previous user exit the telnet connections, then he will be put into a queue, and then he can get into the telnet. Okay, he can use the telnet. So line VTY here, and then again password followed by a telnet password. So maybe just to differentiate them, I'll just put telnet Cisco for the telnet password. And then again, remember, every time you set a password, you have to turn it on by using the login keyword, except for the level 2 password. Okay, so in this case, again, you can do this with 3 lines or 4 lines, depending on whether you want to count config T. And yeah, that's it. So if you want to check this, whether it is done, you can do a show run. And here, you can go through by pressing spacebar, you can go through this quickly, and you will come to this. And that shows us that, yeah, just now we have already put in, we try to open up a telnet, and this right now, by looking at this output, I know that the telnet is already open, and the password for you to get into this router using a remote connection is telnet Cisco. So in fact, if you want to try this out, you have to connect this to a PC. Now I will do this quickly. If you don't want to do this, that's fine. So I'll get a PC here, and then I'll just assign the simplest IP 192.168.1.1, and then I'll put a router IP here. Okay, we cannot test this yet because the router doesn't have an IP. I will show you how to configure the IP first, and then we will come back and test the telnet connections. Okay. So yeah, let's go back to the cheat sheet, and then we are already here. So that means that after you have done this, you have already set 3 passwords. If you really want to be sure, do a check, show run again, and then you can count. Number 1 done. Console number 2 is done. and then the secret password go all the way up. This is the third one. So you have already 3 passwords here, which is very important as you configure any routers, because this is a most common password that you always put in, which means that it is also important for your lab test 1. Okay, now the next thing is I will show you how to configure IP address on this router. That's the last thing for router configurations, and then we'll take a break. I'll give you a short break, and then when we come back, we'll start to talk about the next chapter on network routing. Okay, so now in fact, if you check on this router here, you have how many interfaces do you have? You can just use your mouse. If you scroll your mouse and then you leave it here for a while, then you will see a prompt, and this prompt will show you all the interface status, whether it is up or it is down, just as you will see as you type the show IP interface brief. And yeah, so what I do is now I want to configure the FA00 on this router to connect to PC1, and then we want to build a network here. So earlier, the way we do it is I click on the router, I go to config, and then on the left hand side, this is where I put in all the IP address. But remember, we have done so for the previous 2 class, and that is actually considered cheating, because on a router, you know that there is no interface, there is no there is no display, there is no keyboard, and there is no mouse. So how is it possible for you to get to the router and type something? That's not possible. So what we have done earlier, we are cheating, and today we don't want to cheat anymore. We're going to do it in the real way, which means that I have to type the command to set the IP address for the router interface. Okay, now of course this is also cheating because there is no CLI on the real router. You have to do it from this PC here, but anyway, just as a demo, I will do it from the CLI on the router. So let's start to configure the IP address first. And this command is not hard. You should remember this because you'll be typing this so many times in your lab test 1. Okay. So I'm already in level 2. Remember, for you to configure IP, you have to get to level 4, which is the interface mode. This is important because you have too many interfaces on a router. You have to make sure you are configuring the right interface. Now, this is the first common mistake. Okay, from what I've seen so many years, half of the students who cannot configure IP address on a router is not because they do not know the command. They know the command, but they are panicked. And when they panic, they put the IP for that interface to another interface, which means that you have to be always careful with the interface that you are working with. So first thing is make sure that this is turned on, and then let's say if I connect a cable between them, you will see the interface. Now this one here and this one here. Let's say I just put 2 PC, I'll build 2 network here to show you what is going on. So by doing so, I already have 2 network. Every interface that you connect to a router will give you a network. So here I have 2 networks, and let's say if I want to configure for PC1, okay? Now this is very important that you know you're working with FA00 but not FA01, okay? Because this is the port that's connecting this network here. So how do we configure this? You have to get to config t int, which stands for interface FA00. Put this here a bit. And let's say I want to assign the last IP address of this network to this router. So the command you use is IP address, okay, followed by the IP address that you want to assign. So in this case, the last IP is 192.168.1.254, followed by the subnet mask of the network. So this is a /24 mask, let's say. Now in the exam, you'll be given all this information. So in this example, I'll be using 24, so 255.255.255.0. Remember, you cannot type /24. The router only understands decimal notations. Now you do this, press enter. That means this IP is already configured here. In fact, I can do a check. So this is just halfway there, okay? Don't be too excited yet. So I do a show IP interface brief, and then I see that now this FA00, I already have an IP address, okay? But surprisingly, you see that why is it still down and down? Meaning that right now, this interface is not working yet. It is not up yet. And that is because you have to remember every time you configure an IP address, you have to get to interface FA00. You have to put this command no shut, and this is just like the login keyword that we used earlier, which is to activate the interface. And in this case, when I do this, you will get a message saying that the state is changed to up, meaning that FA00 now is turned on. It should become green color in the network. Now for my case, I didn't turn on the link light, so you don't see the color here. So another way you check whether it is actually working is, again, like I said earlier, you always go back to show IP interface brief, and then now if you check on this interface, it has been changed to up. And it is a good sign if you have two up, meaning that this interface is already active. You can start to send and forward packets to this interface. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing for the second interface. So let's say I want to configure FA01 on network 192.168.2.0/24. So I'll do the same thing on the same router. I go to level 3, I go to level 4 again by typing the correct interface. So just to be very clear, this is 01 here. So you want to make sure you are in 01 here, and then you put in the command IP address, last IP. Now last IP of the network is 2.254, followed by the subnet mask, which is simple because it's /24. Now again, if you get questions which is not /24, let's say /22 or /28, then remember to always change this number because it is not always 255. Okay. Now and then you do a no shut. Always remember, another 50% of students who configure correctly but didn't get the marks is because they forget to put no shut. Is that worth it? Now you see, no shut is just the simple command for you to turn on the interface. So you have to remember on your mind that two lines that you need to configure an IP address, and that is the IP address and no shut. Now if you look at the cheat sheet here, you will get the same thing as well. So in fact, it is so simple. You have the IP address and no shut, but always remember to go to the right interface. So three things. Okay, now just to be sure, you can always do a show IP interface brief. You want to get two up as well for this case. So yeah, you are good. You will see both up. What it means to us is that now both of the interface of your router is already working, and we have successfully built two network on this router. Okay, now another thing that you might want to check, if this is not up. Let's say it happened that you have configured but it is not up, so you want to know what is wrong, then you can always do a show run. And in the show run, remember what does show run tell us is everything that you have ever configured. So in this case, you see that earlier what we have done, the previous two things is that we have configured two IP on FA00 and FA01, and that is also shown in the show run command. Okay, so you want to make sure that if something is wrong, compare this with the instructions to see if you have typed anything wrongly, and these two have to be exactly the same with the instructions that is given to you. Okay, so that is how you set an interface IP on a router. Now as you go on, you can see there are a few more other things. Now the next one is to set the services. I'm not going to show you this because this is not an essential. What I'm showing you is the essential part of router configurations, and for the rest you can actually try this out on your own. In fact, you'll do this in your lab too as well. So I'll just go straight to the last one here, which is in the miscellaneous configuration. So I want you to get to your cheat sheet, go to the last table, and look for these two commands: copy run start and copy start run. Okay, now these two is very important because every time when you configure a router, just like when you do an assignment, if you don't save an assignment and then you just turn off your PC, what will happen? You'll be very angry at yourself because why I spent so much time doing and I didn't save it, and you'll lose all the configurations. Okay, now for the router, if you have configured everything like what you are seeing here on the show run, but you turn off the router, meaning that you turn it off physically by pressing the power button, you lose all the config. I can try this to you, but I don't want to do that because I still need my config file here. So remember why this happened, and this is an important thing because in the lab test, okay, let's say you have configured the router so perfectly, you are a perfectionist, you meet your high standard, So you have 10 things to configure. You have configured all 10 things, you get all 10 marks. Now, if you happen to press turn off on the router, all the config is gone, you will lose all the 10 marks. And this is a problem because some of the time, we actually need to turn off the router. For example, if I have a router fully configured, but I need more interface. And we know that if I want to build more network, the only way is I have to buy more network cards, new card, to install it on the router. And we also know that because our mom say don't ever touch anything without turning on the power first. So you have to turn off the power before you can add any new expansion card. And when you do so, immediately you lose all the config. Which is why before you turn off the router, you have to save your configurations. And after you turn off, you add the card and then you turn it back on again. Automatically, the router will load what is saved earlier as a running configurations. Okay, so over here, if you look at the command here, save config, it is helping us to save the running config. So two things that you have. First thing is the running config, which is what you see when you type a show run. And then you also have a startup config. Startup config, you can in fact do a show start and then you see startup config. So startup config is a bit different from your running config. Now you see what I have done here. I do a show start. Okay, let me do a show start. Now this is the output of the show start. If you go through this, it's already saved there, okay, which is cool. Now anyway, two things, running config and startup config. Startup config is saved to the storage in the router, just like you save a file to your hard disk. Every time you turn on a router, the router will go to the storage, look for this startup config. If anything is found, it will load this startup config as the running config. If nothing is found, means that you don't make any changes, it will load the original default startup config, which is like nothing is configured. Exactly what you get when you get a new router out of the box. Okay, so how I save is very simple. You just do a copy, two parameters here. First one is the running configurations, everything that you have changed, and then you want to save it to startup config. Okay, so the command is very simple. Copy run start. Copy the running configurations to startup config. Now over here, you'll be asked for the file name. If you want to remember this clearly, then you can say router 0 or something. Now if you don't type anything by default, it will automatically assign a name. So you see, if I don't type anything, I just press enter here. Building configurations, okay. It means that now this thing has already been saved from run start, from running config to startup config. So what I can do is, if I get to this router here, let me just turn on the light so that it's more visible to you. So over here, my router is fully green color. If I turn off my router here, I can do this like a boss. I'm not worried anymore because I can just turn it off, and then now everything is red, it's fine. I turn it back on again. In a short while, everything will be green again because I know I already saved the file. So what the router is doing right now is, it is actually loading the startup config to the running config. See, in the short, it becomes green color. And if I do a show run here, Cisco. Now I do a show run. Everything that we have configured earlier is still here. Okay, so this is very important because again, like I said, if you don't do this, you happen to turn off the router to add a card, and then you turn it back on, you have to redo everything. And definitely you won't have enough time for that. So remember, always before you press the power button on the router, always do a copy run start. Okay, now you don't have to manually load the file because by default the router will just load it as you turn it on. But if you want to manually load the startup config, you can just do a start run, meaning that you are trying to load the. So what you are doing here is you are trying to copy starting configurations, which is what we saved earlier, to the running configurations. Okay, so in fact you are just playing around with two keywords here, copy run start and copy start run, and that sums out what you need to know, the basic stuff that you need to know on how to configure a router. And of course you'll see many other commands that you can play around with, you really like to configure routers. But what we have shown you here, what I've shown you and highlighted in yellow color is something that you should immediately know when you configure a router. Okay, at least for your lab test one. So that's it for router configurations here. I hope you have learned something new. Don't go away first. I will stop this stream, and then there's another link on Weber. I need you to join another stream on that link because I don't want you to have a video that is half on router config and then another half on routing. So it will be difficult for you to do a revision. So I will start a new stream and I'll talk about network routing on that stream. So let's get over there, and then we will start the stream in about 10 minutes. Okay, now my clock here is 9:10. We will start around 9:20 and we'll get into lecture 5 about network routing. Okay, so see you on the other side.